running, installing Visual Studio 4, bringing up the background, bringing up laptop 1, bringing up monitors, and going live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, welcome to PJNET Live this Friday night, and it is a Friday night that we have been looking forward to for some time because we are with American Refugee, and I forgot something, so let me try to redo this a moment. I need to practice this. This is very difficult because the Magic Genie is going to unfold the monitors. Okay, it works like this. And there they are, and then we just put the stuff in them. Isn't that cool? And now that they're unfolded, we'll just lock everything into place, and we're good to go. And there. You had a preview, a glimpse of Roger in the green room. Nonetheless, yeah, we were unable to, it seems like we've had a delay or two, but we've been looking at multiple institutions, and I think we've got 2 remaining, and these are the most important 2. And American Refugee has some really cool cool stuff. He's redoing his studio as well. So we'll bring him in, and Roger, you've got some, man, you got all kind of new gear, new headphones, new earplugs. And are those?
Yeah, I got new earplugs.
Yeah, those the designer ones like I've got. They're like $9 at Walmart.
No,
$1 at Goodwill.
They were $1 at the Dollar Tree, and I bought 3 of them for $3 because
the dog could get hungry again.
Well, not only that, I asked the person there. I said, "Did these actually work?" And she said, "Oh yeah, they just don't last very long." She said they work just as good as the ones that are like $8, but they don't last as long as the ones that are $8. So I got 3 of them for $3.
You took the plunge.
This is a high budget show. This is we value this show, and so we put our resources into the show.
How does the dog like the other earphones? How does?
There's very little left of the, there's like a piece of a wire and a slight crushed piece of one bud. And you put me through some stuff because she also scattered my whole box of wires and stuff. And so like I had to go through everything and put everything back together. And I'm not the best at dealing with wires and those kind of configurations.
You don't realize how fragile it is until it kind of collapses. And then you realize how many moving parts there are, but
well, yeah, I just was leaving. Yeah, I would leave everything put together with the digital audio recorder and the headphones, and it was just all together, and it all got completely discombobulated.
Well, I tell you what, while you've been in absentia, and I forget what the problem was last week, but I think both of us were in absentia, to tell you the truth, and a lost phone. And I don't know, dog ate, my dog ate my homework. But I think we're there now, and we have a new studio that you have located somewhere in the state of Louisiana. So anyway, yeah.
And Mark, but before we delve right into the education aspect of the show, because that's the institution that we're talking about today, and it's talking about what we're going to have to do to save our country and kind of resurrect our constitutional republic, in my opinion, and changing the way we educate our youth and thinking long term is a big part of it. But we're also going into religion and spirituality next week. And I want to go ahead and talk just for a second about why that show didn't happen last week. You know why that show didn't happen last week, Mark?
Tell me.
A piece of software that I installed on my phone that I'm going to endorse. And I want to endorse this piece of software. It's called Covenantize. And it actually did crash last week and prevented me from being able to do the show. But that wasn't so much their fault. It was because of the way I had set up the piece of software. But it's a great thing that I would highly recommend to men that are trying to live properly. It has a couple of different features on it. One is kind of a blocking and screening filter. But what I like better than that is the accountability side of it. I have an accountability partner And if I were to go to any websites that I, as a Christian man, don't want to go to, he would get a notice that I had been to those websites. And what it also does is it periodically, randomly, a number of times a day, takes a picture of whatever is on my screen. And it kind of blurs that out, but so that it wouldn't be explicit, but it includes those in those accountability reports. And it's a real good thing. I had just gone so hardcore with it that I didn't have permission to uninstall it on my own phone. And when it got when there was a crash that was really more the fault of something that T-Mobile had changed, and so they had to make an adjustment because of what T-Mobile changed, I didn't have the authority to go in and uninstall and reinstall. So I had set up the rules so tightly on myself. But it's a Christian-owned company. It's a great piece of software. And I'm gonna tell you something, Mark. Right now, I would give their screening a C+, and I would give their accountability a B+, and I would give their customer service an A+, because I talked to them during the week, and they are just real good folks over there, and they're doing good things.
Well, tomorrow morning, I meet every Saturday. There's a group of men who get together for purposes of accountability and other things. We do Bible study, but I haven't been able to not been able to attend for several weeks because I have to clock in at 7:30. Well, tomorrow I clock in at 8, so that'll give me 20 minutes with the guys tomorrow morning for breakfast and some fellowship, Bible study, accountability. And so it's important for us to push ourselves spiritually and challenge each other spiritually.
And Mark, this also segues into education in another way. Something you and I have talked about before, and I thought about during the week and how I was going to put it in the show. One of the things that we have to start doing a better job of as Christians is sex education of our teenage kids. And in some
we might
cases,
want to start with our adults.
well, we're gonna. Okay, we do, but that's making up for problems that are already here. I'm talking about trying to prevent the problems, and in some cases, we have to go much younger than teenagers now, whether we want to or not. Because whether we like it or not, there's sex education in the schools. There's transgenderism in the schools. There's acceptance of homosexuality in the schools. And pornography is ubiquitous. And our kids are getting it at very, very, very young ages. And you and I have talked about the fact that churches need to stop being afraid to mention sex. And
I don't know if it's fear or if they're in denial. But either way, we need to tackle it,
We have to tackle. Look, ideal country, sex would be taught at home by the parents, and it wouldn't be done at a super young age. Not in an ideal country. If we don't teach it both in the homes and in the churches and starting at a young age, the kids already have a completely faulty sex education before they, before they should even know what's going on.
Well,
I was talking.
There's a book, I've read several books on men's ministry, and let me tell you something. The Industrial Revolution was a pivotal point in a cultural decline. And I won't go into all the complexities of it, but think about it. When boys and girls were raised on the farm, by age 7 or 8, they had assisted giving birth, helping cattle, calve and horses fold, and sex education was a natural part of helping out on the farm. So it was a lot easier back then because it wasn't in an academic or scientific environment. It's, the horse was having problems and pull. So it was natural.
And then it might be rather obvious that the parents needed to say something to kids like, okay, humans aren't generally as violent about it as these particular birds over here. Okay. But you would see the different animals. Okay. Right. You know where I was talking to a priest friend of mine, and he works a lot with in pre-Cana with couples that are preparing for marriage. And he also counsels a lot of couples that are having difficulties in their first year of marriage. Okay. And that's just what a lot of that's a lot of what his ministry is. He studied those issues a lot. And he told me the biggest problem that he sees is that boys who are really pretty good Catholics and Christians and came from good homes got their entire sexual education from pornography.
Or, yeah,
And
you know, it was pretty bad when boys were learning it in the locker room, you know, because,
now it's
but in
no,
either
now
case,
now it's from porn. And so what happens, even if they haven't had sex yet, and even if they have good hearts, when they get married, they expect their wife to now do everything they've seen the female porn star do.
Yeah, it's fiction.
And they, yes, and they expect to treat her in that fashion that they've seen, and they horrify, frighten, freak out, or disgust their new wives.
There you go.
And it is because of faulty sex education. So, yeah, I both wanted to give the Covenant Eyes plug and kind of segue into when we talk education, we're not just talking reading, writing, arithmetic, and civics. We are, and reading, writing, arithmetic, and civics are key, as is math and science, okay, as are math and science. But we're also talking about things like sexual education and cultural education, which right now they're getting through the movies, they're getting through music. Mark, you know what movie I saw this week? I saw Unplanned. Are you familiar?
Well, there has been much talked about. I have not seen it, but our guest on Tuesday night actually bought out 2 movie theaters and had a private viewing of that. That was part of his ministry in that community, because otherwise the movie would not have shown. I guess it was a small market or something, or maybe it was a pre-release. But there is much being said about it. Now, the story itself is not new.
No, it's not new. It's been known for a while. But, well, see, Planned Parenthood attempted to keep this movie from being made. They've attempted to keep this movie from being shown. And one of it's the number 3 movie in the country right now. It's making money. It's doing quite well. But it's in a limited number of theaters, both because there was an underestimation of how popular it would be, but also because there's literally areas that are boycotting the movie because of Planned Parenthood, okay? And pressure that they're putting on, and they were calling it fiction and this and that and the other and so on and so forth. Now, before I say this, because I do recommend that people go see this movie with their kids. Warning, this is an R-rated film. It is not R-rated because of nudity or language. It is R-rated because of the very serious nature of the topic, and because abortion is a gory business. Okay? And so there is some gore that is a part of the education, and parents need to make their own decisions about at what age their children are ready to be exposed to that, when they want to tell them about it. You know as well as I do, kids get exposed to it just going to the pro-life rallies because of people that carry around signs.
Well, one of the ironies that I saw on social media is a 16-year-old girl can by herself, without parental approval or notification, consent, anything, get an abortion, but cannot go see this movie because it's rated R.
Isn't that interesting?
And this is, well, it's just another in a long,
she also
long
can't
parade.
go get a tooth pulled at a dentist without parental consent.
Right.
So she can't see this movie. She can't get a tooth pulled, but she can have her child killed.
Right.
And let me tell you, aside from the fact that I want people to see it to educate their children, what happened to this woman in the movie, a part of the problem she had was a spiritual problem, but a part of the problem she had was an educational problem. And she, even though she came from a good family and a pro-life family, was not properly educated on the issue, and so was easily fooled by Planned Parenthood early in life, and was easily deceived because she did not know the facts. Now, before I kind of get into some of what's so great about the movie, just to give it a quick review, okay, just to be honest, on the technical merits of the movie, they didn't have a lot of money. It's somewhat low budget, but it's not bad. I would call it about halfway in between a major Hollywood production and like a low budget Lifetime production. It's about halfway between the two. The lead did a very good job, but it's a lot of unknown actors and actresses that, you know, their skills aren't as developed, but it's good. I mean, it's actually better than most movies. It's just not, I wouldn't call it high art, okay, in the from the technical aspect.
Well, technical
and
and artistic merit can only enhance. For example, it's been said,
Right.
you can make a movie in 3D. If it's a bad movie, it's just a bad movie in 3D. So technical merit,
Exactly.
and I'm big on technical merit. I mean, gee, look at all this stuff we
Right.
are surrounded by. But that is no substitute for content. And I think what we
Right.
have here is a message. Now, before I forget, you said that some theaters are refusing to show the movie. So I'm starting to wonder now, how much money are you willing to pay to hold on to your idea that abortion is okay?
How much of a financial hit are you going to take if you're in San Francisco and you piss off the LGBT, excuse me for language, but if you upset the LGBTQ LMNOP community, Planned Parenthood, and the government of San Francisco?
Well, in San Francisco, that's one thing, but we're seeing some things, and loosely related to this, Chick-fil-A was effectively booted out of the San Antonio airport.
There you go. I saw that.
And folks, the frog is boiling. Is all I can tell you. But you know, you would think, for example, one of the top porn sites is owned by Jewish people. Okay, I won't mention any names. Won't tell you how I know that, but at some point, you know, money tends to obfuscate our value system. You know, in other words, our values are situationally dependent. You know, if you can make enough money at it, you know, the money does good things, you know, and you can rationalize it. But now it's operating in reverse. People are saying, no, I'm not going to show this movie. It's a #3 movie in the United States. I could make a ton of money, but I'm going to forego that on ideological grounds. This is one of the arguments that oh heck, I know him, The Case for Christ made, in that some people say, you know, the apostles, they were just telling a story, and he points out they died for it. If they thought it was a fraud, they wouldn't have died for it, and they didn't die fun deaths. They were very gruesome, torturous, tormenting deaths. So I wonder just how much they will forego to hang on to this, you know, pro-life is a bad thing. How much does it cost to hold that? It's going to be an interesting play.
It's going to be interesting, but to the movie, so yeah, I'd give it kind of a C+ on the acting and the technical merit and all of that. But the story is so compelling and so emotional that it makes it both entertaining at times and very gut-wrenching and heart-wrenching at times. But it is also very educational, Mark. And Abby Johnson was a smart girl going to college from a Christian pro-life family, and but who literally knew nothing of abortion and Planned Parenthood. She kind of supposed that she was pro-life because her family was pro-life and had never given the matter much thought. Planned Parenthood had a booth at a campus event. She talked to a very persuasive Planned Parenthood person who told her that it was the goal of Planned Parenthood to reduce the need of abortion and to have as few abortions as possible. Right. And all the wonderful things Planned Parenthood was doing with education and with birth control and so on and so forth. And then they told her about these horrible pro-lifers, supposedly, who were hypocrites, who were actually terrorizing, you know, poor young girls that were in trouble, that were in their very early stages of pregnancy, when the child was nothing but a glob of cells and was not really a human being yet, and trying to, you know, force these women. She got convinced. She started volunteering for Planned Parenthood. Okay, and she was first volunteering for Planned Parenthood as what they call a clinic escort, where literally at the particular town where she lived, the courts had already made the pro-lifers had to stay outside the gate. Okay, they had to stay a certain distance away, but they were within shouting distance, and they would be there protesting and praying, and they would call the girls as the girls were getting out of cars. Hey, why don't you come over and talk to us? And they would try and talk them out of having abortions. What was the job of the escorts supposedly to protect these women from this. Really, it was the job of the escorts to get the girls from car to clinic as quickly as possible,
sure,
without getting any information.
Right.
Because what they wanted to do is make sure they got abortions.
Right.
Okay. They were not all about any free flow of information. One of the things that you see in the movie is the way this girl gets corrupted by her influence in Planned Parenthood, volunteering there, and the way it starts to affect her as a person. And you start seeing this reasonably innocent but somewhat troubled, naive young girl becoming a worse person. You really do. And it's one of the sad parts of the movie is the part where you're seeing her become harder. She ends up, when she graduates college, going to work for Planned Parenthood as a counselor. And she also, by the way, has a couple of abortions herself. But in the counseling work that she's doing for Planned Parenthood is the first time that she starts to realize that she's giving some misinformation. Now, she's justifying that she's giving this, and she knows she's giving misinformation because she knows how hard the morning after pill was on her and how sick she got, and how long she bled for, and she's lying to the women about what kind of side effects they're going to have. But she's convinced that she's doing the right thing. She goes from that, and she actually advances up the scale, and she becomes the youngest Planned Parenthood clinic director in the country. She becomes a clinic director at the age of 29, so she's very successful. And she actually becomes Planned Parenthood's employee of the year. And then there's a couple of things that really make it all hit the wall for her. Because her conscience had been starting to bother her, and like all of us, she had been kind of slipping down. But the big changes for her, one day when they are short of people, they asked her to assist in the room where the abortion is taking place. And she sees the ultrasound as the abortion is taking place. And she sees a little human being with arms and legs swimming away from the probe, doing everything that it can to survive, and getting sucked out. And she saw that child fight for its life. And probably about a 10-week-old, about 10 weeks along, well within the first trimester where she had assumed. This ends up getting her to where she goes into their records and she looks at her own ultrasounds of the abortions that she had, and she sees her own babies that she killed for the first time. And that has a deep effect on her. But then after that, she's at this big convention, Planned Parenthood convention, and they announce that they're opening up right there in Texas, the biggest abortion clinic in the country, and how they're going to be able to do abortions 7 days a week, and the number of thousands of abortions they're going to do. She receives the award for Clinic Director of the Year because her clinic was the only clinic that met its, quote, abortion quota every week of the year. And she also talks about how the abortion quotas are that they're told how the abortion quotas are going to be increased for the following year. Well, she ends up raising her hand and standing up and say, but wait a minute, I thought our job was to limit the number of abortions. Kind of a hushed silence, and she's ignored. Afterwards, her boss berates her for calling her out on that. She's also upset because the clinic where she has worked has only performed abortions up to 12 weeks. Or maybe 16. This new clinic is going to do it up to 24 weeks. And that is shocking and upsetting to her. And when she's confronted and actually reprimanded and gets in an argument with her boss actually starts saying things like, you know what McDonald's makes off of hamburgers? Nothing. They make all their money off of fries and sodas and their little things, the hamburgers are just what get them in the door. Okay. So, things like birth control, that's what gets people off the door. Abortion is our fries. That's where we make our money. Okay. And she says, but we're a nonprofit. And her boss says, nonprofit is a business model. Is not a business model. It's a tax status. What do you think's paying for your very good salary? What do you think's paying for your 401k? What do you think's paying for your sick leave? So it really showed you. And the last thing I'll say, because I kind of went on a little bit too much about this movie, probably because it moved me so much. It's very moving because after you saw her start off ignorant, Then when she had to justify things to herself, it start becoming darker spiritually. Once you can know she can no longer justify it, you see her begin to awake spiritually. You see the guilt, you see the shame, but you see the crying out to Jesus, you see the redemption, and she becomes a pro-life activist. And she ends up protesting at the very clinic that she used to direct. Can you still hear me, Mark?
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay, I am have to do something. I'm getting some background noise on my phone, and I have taken care of it, so that's taken care of.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, now she is threatened severely. She is sued. She is harassed. Planned Parenthood comes at her and does everything that they can. One of the great things about the educational part of this movie, though, you and I have talked about critical thinking before and how critical thinking is lacking. This movie has it. It examines both sides of the issue. I am not for one moment going to pretend like it doesn't have a pro-life tilt. It does. It is a pro-life movie attempting to convince people of the pro-life position. But it does expose pro-lifers who do bad things. Mm-hmm. It does expose the best of the pro-choice arguments being made. Right. It looks at the other side of the issue. This movie is not going to affect somebody who's a dug-in pro-abort. Anybody who is a moderate pro-abortion person with the slightest bit of discomfort, this movie could convert if they go and watch it. There are people that I would want to try to sensitively get in front of this movie because ignorance plays a huge part in where they are and they're not as dug in. And those are the people this is going to affect. With the pro-lifers, you're going to be preaching to the choir, but also inspiring them maybe to go protest at a clinic. Because one of the things that came out, one of the reasons Planned Parenthood is so adamant about stopping those protesters is their own research has shown that when there are people protesting and praying outside of a clinic, while that's going on, the abortion rates drop by 50%. Mm-hmm. Now, some of that might be the Holy Spirit. Some of that might be that girls that are driving up just see those protesters and don't want to walk past them. But the abortion rates drop 50%. And some people would say, well, the girl's just going to go back the next day. Not often. We've already learned that simple things like a 24-hour waiting period where a girl has to sign up and then come back in 24 hours to get the abortion drops abortions greatly from where if they can just get them while they're there, because it's a serious issue and people have to consider it. People who are praying at clinics don't realize, they underestimate the number of lives they're saving. They are saving lives because you don't see the lives you save. Mm-hmm. You see the lives you didn't save. You see the women that go in and get the abortions and leave. You don't see the women that turned around and drove home and then didn't come back the next day. And so that was very educational for me and really makes me want to spend more time praying at abortion clinics and protesting outside of abortion clinics because it saves lives. And I would highly recommend, if you think your kid can handle it, you decide on the age, on when you're going to bring them there. But remember that your kid in grade school is already being indoctrinated by the left. And I'd highly advise parents to make it a family thing and bring their kids to see this movie.
I think there's a bigger point here, and we'll use it to segue into education, mm-hmm. is the impact that this movie is going to have, I think, is going to be on the people like Abby. Those people who have been propagandized mm-hmm. by the pro-choice movement. We want to make abortion safe, legal, and rare. Mm-hmm. You hear Hillary Clinton said it, but it gets repeated all over. No. No. Abortion is never safe. Somebody dies. Okay. Mm-hmm. The rare thing. But I think the impact is because we have what I call counter-programmed, analogous to putting weight on the other side of the scales. At the end of the day, that's all we can do, and level mm-hmm. the playing field. So in that sense, I think the movie's going to have a lot of impact, but it also underscores what you're about to say in education. But before you say it, I want to say, folks, we are at war. The Bible says mm-hmm. so in Ephesians 6. We have digital tools, digital assets, digital weapons at our disposal What we do here at PJNet is waging digital warfare, and we need to put truth out there. We need to exalt the truth. We need to proclaim the truth just to get some weight on the other end of the scales so that people can be not persuaded, but make a informed decision.
Absolutely. And Mark, on everything, we need to use technology, do our research. They can't be the only ones fighting a digital war. We have to be fighting a digital war. Now, we talked about the way our kids are being propagandized. Our kids are being propagandized in public schools, in many private schools, and unfortunately in some Christian schools. Okay? This is just absolutely happening. It's one of the reasons I massively, massively, massively recommend homeschooling. Now, for anybody who's afraid of it, and I'm not going to give a whole lot of time to homeschooling on this show because this show isn't even long enough to cover the issue. But what I can tell you I've discovered, there's so many resources out there. All you got to do is type homeschooling resources and help, and it just all comes popping up right on your screen. There are uncountable organizations, many of them Christian organizations, many of them conservative constitutional organizations, many of them real civics-based organizations that are there to help you and teach you how to homeschool your kids and take care of it right in the home. But what I was also loving about a lot of these websites, let's say for whatever reason you can't homeschool your children, okay? But you can certainly look at what you would do if you were, figure out what they're not getting at school, and you can have a couple of hours on Saturday or Sunday where you make sure that you're doing some deprogramming and you're using some of these materials to educate your kids on some of the issues that they're not getting in the schools.
A lot of it is as simple as what you just said. I'm going to restate it a little bit differently. It's the same thing. Folks, as a parent, you have to be involved in your child's education. You need to know.
You are responsible for the education of your child.
Exactly. At the bare minimum, you need to know what they're being taught. Okay? Because if you know what they're being taught, you then can do what you just said, Roger, is find out what they're not being taught. I'll give you an example, then I'll turn it back over to you. My daughter was being taught evolution as a fact, not as a theory, but as a fact. And so I sat down with my daughter and told her that here's why I don't, that evolution can't be a fact because there are problems. And I gave some very common examples I use in a lot of apologetic discussions. I love the topic of evolution. I never argue against evolution. I argue the earth can't be that old, which is consistent with the Genesis account of the creation. And I say, Shelby, there are problems with their approach. They're telling it to you like it's a fact, but if it's true that the Colorado River carved the Grand Canyon over a period of millions of years, why is the northern rim of that canyon at a lower elevation than the southern rim? Because you see, water doesn't flow uphill. So, and I have a litany of these types of things that challenge, and this, whether it's evolution, we should apply these same intellectual challenges to any truth claim, including religion, including Christianity.
Yes, we should.
It's okay to challenge the truth, because if it's true, it will prevail and it'll be stronger.
Critical thinking and education is.
Exactly.
If you haven't been taught the counter argument, you're weak. And the very first time somebody who's more educated than you, and maybe, God forbid, they might even be smarter than you, encounters you, they're going to talk you out of the truth. They're going to talk you out of your truth-based position.
They will cause you to question your own faith.
Okay? They can do it.
And there's a lot of techniques here, and you got to be careful, though. There's a story, I assume it is true, that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are the worldwide experts on counterfeiting. And law enforcement agencies from around the world come to them for advice and lectures on how to identify a counterfeit bill. Here's how they do it. You study the authentic. You don't study the counterfeit. You study the authentic. Anything that varies from the authentic is counterfeit. There are who knows how many combinations of counterfeits. You can't learn them all.
Mm-hmm.
Study the
Mm-hmm.
authentic, but it's good to know why you believe what you believe. And again, critical thinking involves challenging the truth. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a little scary to some people because the logic is, well, you know, the Bible said it, I believe it, and that settles it. Well,
When I went to college, the courses were still a little better than they are today. And in English, it was called English 1101 and 1102. Okay, it was the first two English courses that I took. We were taught rhetoric, we were taught logic,
logic.
and if I was writing a paper on why capitalism was a great system, I was not going to get a good grade in that paper if I didn't bring up the arguments against capitalism, state them as clearly as I could, and try to defeat them.
Well, let me tell you what the internet's done. My daughter, in English, college English, had to do an argument. So the topic she chose was women being drafted. And we had a nice chat. We were, you know, spending the day together. We like to hang out from time to time. And she was going over her paper. And here's what technology has done. She went and said, you know, that women served in the Civil War dressed as men. And she went through this long history of stuff. I could tell she just went online, Googled it, and got all this information.
Correct.
And when she got done, she was kind of proud of herself. She'd assembled. She'd worked hard, by the way. And I said, Shelby, that is good that you worked that hard, but you have not done one thing to make your point. I said, you are missing facts that address the issue. I said, here's some facts. Women are, the Marine Corps did the study, women are biologically weaker than men physically. It's a fact. Yeah, I'm not saying women aren't good. But we men have more lung capacity. Okay, we have our muscles are built differently, or they're clumpier. Women get injured in any workplace, including the military, at a rate 4 times higher than men. Okay, I said women. Now you can't find a metric on this, but the Center of Military Readiness, who has appeared on this program, points out that women are high value targets for becoming captive. I said if a man and a woman are serving together and the woman falls, if you're in battle, you need to proceed with the objective and let that's not going to happen on the battlefield. If as a man, you're not going to let a woman suffer. You're going to stop. Now you're both out of action, and now you're a target, blah, blah, blah. I said, great work on the historical background. A Google search could have yielded that. But you need to gain some facts that actually progress a
Mark,
point.
what you're talking about, I saw just working offshore years ago. And yeah, those were some pretty tough women that were working out there. But I saw them unable to pick things up, and I saw 3 men stopping doing what they were doing and running over there
to their
help
aid.
the woman. Yeah, and I saw how much it hurt the efficiency of the operation. And I wasn't busting my butt like that. I was doing security out there. Yeah. It was funny because what we do as a security guard largely is observe and report. And now I'm not going to report about that, but I sure was observing it.
Yeah.
And I was looking at what was going on. Our government, our system of government, one of the reasons that people don't understand the Electoral College today and why it's good is because they haven't been taught their civics. They haven't learned what all the arguments were, so on and so forth. Mark, if you want to teach your kids or you want to learn yourself, go to Hillsdale College's website. They are offering free online American history courses. They're offering they've got a Constitution 101 and a Constitution 102 course that they're offering for free. Yeah, you can just be making your kids do that at home, and you can be doing it yourself to make sure that you've got all of the information down pat yourself. Because every day now I hear arguments against the Electoral College where they have a complete misunderstanding of why it was instated, what it does, the concept of states' rights, the fact that there were those founders who argued very much for a national popular vote, and there were those that argued very much for whoever wins the majority of the states.
And it's funny, or ironic, or providential, however you want to look at it. But at the time those arguments were being made, you didn't have high concentrations of populations that would disenfranchise individual states the way we have it today.
Correct.
It's that simple. It's that.
The Electoral
plus,
College,
you need to know some history. The federal government was created by the states. Okay.
Also, people will go and they'll quote something without looking at what followed up. It is absolutely true that Alexander Hamilton initially argued for the popular vote. By the end of the process, if you look at his later writings, he ended up thinking, nah, I think we did the right thing with the Electoral College. I think that was the right compromise. Yeah. But people will go and quote his opening argument before he was in essence educated, when there actually used to be this debate that would go back and forth, and our founding fathers would have horrible disagreements with each other and work it out. Let me tell you another amazing thing.
He was persuadable. He was persuadable.
He was persuadable.
You reckon that would happen today? Do you think that would happen today?
It's rare.
I don't see
rare. It doesn't happen on huge levels because there's the whole body. It doesn't happen enough to swing large numbers of people. You might have 2 or 3 individual senators that are persuadable on something. But that's it. Let me tell you another thing that I hear in these people arguing against the Electoral College.
Okay.
There's a total misunderstanding of the 3/5 compromise. Okay, they've almost got it opposite, and they think that the 3/5 compromise had something to do with the Electoral College, and they think that the 3/4 compromise was this horrible racist thing. Okay, first of all, it had nothing to do with the Electoral College per se, but the people who wanted blacks to count as an entire person were the slave-owning states. They were the slave owners because they would get more congressional representatives that way. They would get more funding that way, and they would get more electoral votes. The anti-slave states wanted the blacks to count as 0 people.
Right.
Okay.
Well, okay. Apply that same logic to immigration. When the census is done, it doesn't do it on citizens. If you are alive and breathing, you are counted in the census. Now, the census determines how many, well, it determines the makeup of the congressional districts. So if you want more, if you're on the left, of course you want all these people counted. The more you can bring in on your side of the scales, the more political power you'll have. Before I forget, there is one serious error in the Electoral College.
And that is?
It can be a tie.
It can be a tie, but there's a fix.
I know, but they should have just added one. Somehow. The Supreme Court can't be a tie.
Well, here's the deal. It has not been able to be a tie at all points in history. It's not always an even number. If we added another, if if Puerto Rico became a state, I believe with their population, I believe all they would get is 3 electors. So it would add an odd number, to the mix. But they conceived of the possibility, and they did a fix. It goes to Congress, and you have to have run. Some people don't know that Congress elects the president in the case of a tie, but they can only vote for people who ran for president.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you have to have run, and so they can't just decide, hey, we're going to go outside and elect, whoever the heck.
This is actually different from the Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House does not have to be a member of the House. You or I could be Speaker of the House.
Yes, and in fact, I kind of pushed a little bit for some ideas of thinking about that when the Republicans were going to appoint a new speaker, saying, hey, you know, if the speaker is really supposed to be the speaker for the whole House and everything like that, and you're going to have a majority leader that basically does what the minority leader does, there might actually be something good about getting a figure who is conservative but well respected.
Yeah.
You know,
Newt Gingrich comes to mind. Yeah.
A former speaker comes to mind, and you know, and things like that. So you can do it. But I want to tell people something else about Hillsdale College, and I think I've mentioned this before. But first of all, Hillsdale's a very good private college, okay, and it's a very conservative college. It has a very Christian bent. It's got a wonderful history and everything like that. But Hillsdale College started running into some problems a few years ago, which is that they didn't like these federal mandates that were coming down the pipeline, requiring them to teach certain things and adopt certain standards, and essentially trying to ruin them the way the federal government's been ruining all of the colleges. And so they told the federal government no. And the federal government said, if the answer is no, you don't apply for, you can't get any federal grants or any federal money. And they said, okay, we won't take any. Well, then the federal government came back and said, we're going to apply that even to federally guaranteed student loans for students, and we're going to apply that to Pell Grants. Well, Hillsdale fought that in court, and they lost. But even though they lost,
but you know what they did? Go ahead.
They said, to hell with you. Our students can't get Pell Grants or federally guaranteed student loans. They started raising money to do private grants for students who couldn't afford, and they started raising money to do guaranteed loans for students who couldn't afford.
Well, that's happening today.
And they said, we're not taking your money. Yep.
Well, what I saw, and I saw this article recently, and it just horrified me that the tentacles of the federal government go everywhere.
Everywhere.
And it's being used in this case as a tool, as a weapon against Hillsdale College. If somebody took a job, okay, if Hillsdale College, you were a student and you were getting a guaranteed student loan, and that student also worked part-time at a Jewish synagogue, nope. And there were some very persuasive legal arguments based on freedom of religion. You know, this was discrimination on a protected class, and you say they lost, but I'm not sure how that panned out. But I did see the article that Hillsdale College basically said, and okay, this is what I want to see, okay, because the federal government, through initiatives such as
I think churches should become for-profit organizations.
By His Grace Ministries is a for-profit organization. I think the 501c3 has done more to disenfranchise churches than the tax advance. You know, they bought it pretty cheap. So that's one way that the federal government has bought off the churches and held them at bay.
Correct.
Another one is through initiatives such as Common Core. They have brought these schools into a dependency upon federal money. And let's get into education. I was going to ask you a question, and I don't know how we're going to limit this, but I'm involved in a strategy. We're using Alabama.
Mark, what you just said is why I gave up on a lot of what I was going to do in the show, because I realized you could just do a weekly show on education and nothing but it. And I realized that I had to limit it. But go ahead.
Well, basically, the idea, and it's an idea that you've expressed, is bleed the dragon.
Yes.
The idea is to drain the schools of their students, okay, by homeschooling. The other way is to get churches involved in schooling. You know, now a lot of rural churches can't do a school, but they could do one grade. Okay, if you get 12 churches together. And the idea is to siphon off, do a brain drain, to get the students out of the public school system, because I can tell you that FTE stands for full-time equivalencies. That is how many student hours there were. That's why they take attendance. Okay?
Yep.
Because it has to do with how much grant money or federal matching funds, how that gets dispersed is based on full-time equivalency based on attendance in classes. Well, if you start siphoning off the students, that will go away, and it would be much easier. Well, the school would basically collapse because they would go bankrupt. Now, when a school, now this happened where I live, right here in Jefferson County, not this, but a school failed. It did so badly that the state, quote, took over. That's kind of interesting because here in Florida, the school board is a constitutionally created body. So we still have a Jefferson County school board, but the state took their authority away to manage the schools. They still meet. I don't know what they do. They still get paid, but they can't. So the state took it away and then basically contracted it out. So it's now a charter. Okay. I thought, now this would really be interesting. What if it worked? I know there's a huge mountain to climb, but what if you could siphon off enough students to cause the school system to collapse, and then the state steps in and hires who? Us to run the schools.
Right.
Well, that'd be a nice play. Anyway,
we also need conservatives running for school board seats. That's something that we absolutely need. I don't want to end the show without mentioning that. There's another book I want to mention, and they operate the National Constitution Center and promote the National Constitution Center promotes the book. Now, let me say right now, even though I'm going to endorse this book, I do not agree with 100% of everything that Clausen says. Okay, and Clausen also is a Mormon. I'm not a Mormon. Okay, I like a lot of what Clausen said, but Clausen wrote a book called The 5,000-Year Leap. And it had a profound effect on Glenn Beck. And there's a National Constitution Center that you can go to online, and you can get the workbooks for the 5,000-Year Leap, and you can get the CDs. And he argued that in a couple of hundred years, that the United States did about 5,000 years worth of advancing, and basically advanced all of human civilization about 5,000 years, is what he argued. And but he argued that there were literally 28 principles that were either unique or unusual in the founding of our country, and that those 28 principles built this country. And when you go through his book, you study those 28 principles. You don't have to agree with him. If you disagree with him, though, learn why he argued that was the principle. Then you can study the counter arguments. There are people out there agreeing with the principles, but arguing about where they came from. Some think they came from the Bible, and some think they came from the European Enlightenment. And it's an incredibly educational process to read that book, to look at those videos, to consider those arguments. And at one point, I was actually thinking about going down and reading. That would have to be like its own thing, a show where you just went down and read each of the 28 principles. And then you can't even really do it in one show, because what are you going to do? Give 2 minutes to each of the 28 principles? That's nothing. And you're already at a 56-minute show. So I had to realize, okay, not going to be able to go into detail here, but really encourage people to look up the National Constitution Center, really encourage people to buy Clausen's 5,000-Year Leap. And study that and study those principles. And to kind of close this a little bit, what are some of the main reasons for me about stressing education as being one of the most important ways we have to save the country? Well, it's twofold. One is that the liberals have taken over the education of our children, and they are indoctrinating our children, and they're turning them against our values, and they're turning their brains into mush as well. So that's a part of it. But the other thing, it was well understood by our founders that this form of government was only going to work for a well-educated people. And they didn't define well-educated by well-degreed. They defined it by can read, can write, knows their scripture, knows logic, knows critical thinking, knows how the government works. Okay. And they were like, you can't give an uneducated people too much freedom. Okay. If we are going to have this amount of freedom, they need to be very educated and know how to use it. Okay.
That is almost in parallel to free enterprise, depends on a well-informed consumer. Yes.
Yes. The system collapses if we become an uneducated people. And Mark, the other thing that was weird is that one of the principles, actually one of Skousen's principles, and I very much believe one of the principles of the country, is that we needed to take the education of our people very seriously. But as much as the founders understood we needed to take the education of our kids very seriously, They didn't create a national Department of Education. And it was not their understanding that it was the it was America's job to do it. It was families' job to do it. It was parents' job to do it. It was churches' job to do it. There were various institutions in American society would do it, but they did not conceive that the government itself would do it. Because they tended to understand, like Jefferson, that the government that governs least governs best. And that was an understood thing. Mark, our people are so uneducated today that the word democracy, okay, they don't know what it is, they don't know what it means, and they think that it's 100% good. No, it's a concept with pluses and minuses and dangers, and we are not a pure democracy. We are a constitutional republic. And one of the best quotes that's often attributed to Benjamin Franklin, I question whether he really said it, just because from my research, I don't know that the word lunch existed and was used. But what the quote is, and it's almost always attributed to Franklin, is that democracy is two wolves and a lamb getting together and voting on what to have for lunch. And liberty is a very well-armed lamb with the right to contest the vote.
Very well put.
Very well put. And part of the reason, one of the main reasons for the existence of the Constitution was to protect the rights of the minority. In a pure democracy, the rights of the minority will not be protected. And this also segues us into next week a little bit with religion and spirituality, because the fact of the matter is they also understood that a free people needed to be a highly religious people. Now, the word religion changes meaning over the course of time in different people's minds. So to some people, religion has almost a purely negative connotation today. And they do a huge, spirituality is this, religion's this. I'm going to tell you what they were talking about when they said religion. They were talking about a belief in God. They were talking about morality. They were talking about the Ten Commandments and the Beatitudes. They were talking about our Judeo-Christian heritage. Okay, that's what they were talking about when they talked about religion. And when they used the word religion, and they just understood people have to be educated, they have to be hardworking, and they have to be decent, or this system won't work. And some of the founding fathers who questioned whether our system would collapse thought these people are going to have so much freedom, and the voting is going to play so much into this thing that people are going to eventually start robbing from the future. They're going to spend the treasury. People are going to get lazy. They're going to get uneducated. And that's what they thought might bring it down. You know, they thought that's what might bring it down. We might have set up a system that's so good that people become too fat and happy and lazy. And,
well, the history
of
various forms of civilization tends to run about 200 years. And this is kind of the germination of the collapse. Is you generally have more of the have-nots than the haves, and when you start playing this in a political arena, the have-nots can outvote the haves and vote themselves all kinds of entitlements that cannot be afforded in the long run. And this is the implosion of the system. We've seen it. Well, we've seen it all over Europe, but we are seeing it here in the United States.
Well, let me say one more thing. We're running along, so we really do need to close. And when I think about everything we didn't talk about in this show, and how much we've talked about and how good it's been, you realize what a big topic it is. But I want to bring this up because I thought about it earlier. It's important. And it very much is about being educated, not just educated in what words mean, but educated in what other people think words mean, or that words have different meanings. One of our problems in this society is that we talk past each other and we don't hear one another. And one of the reasons that has come to happen is that words mean completely different things to different groups of people in this country. And if you don't understand that, you don't know how to communicate them. I'll give you a couple of examples. The first example I will give you is the word evolution. Okay, now, when they want to destroy a Republican candidate in the primaries, what they'll do is they'll say something, and they'll usually say, but just by a show of hands, No answers, just a show of hands. How many of you candidates believe in evolution as a fact? Okay. Every Republican candidate who raises his hand, they will go to the Christian community, they will go to those who reject evolution and say, this guy doesn't believe in God, this guy's an atheist, this guy believes in evolution. Everyone who didn't raise their hand, they'll go to the other side, they'll say, this person is an idiot. He has no education whatsoever. He doesn't even realize that species change over time. Okay. So you see, when I say I don't believe in evolution, I don't believe that life comes from non-life, period. Okay? And I believe that there is a divine spark that created everything. So that's at a starting point before I even study how old the earth is. Because at this point, God could have still used evolutionary means or whatever, but I'm not going there. I'm just saying I absolutely believe, boom, intelligent design, God caused life. Okay? That doesn't mean that I deny that beagles exist. Okay, that doesn't mean that I don't deny that wolves evolve over time due to selective breeding done by human beings. In addition to selective breeding, yes, random mutations do happen. And yes, natural selection does happen. And in a way, even
within
selective
species.
breeding within species. It doesn't take one species to another, but they'll try to act like we don't see that. In fact, natural selection and selective breeding are related in that the more a dog looks like a puppy or a human baby, the more people tend to love it, so they tend to breed more of them. So you get a mutation of a dog that looks really cute and's got those doe eyes and dimples when it smiles, okay, and people are going to want to breed that dog, okay, because they're going to want more dogs that look like that. Another one is affirmative action, Mark. If I say I'm in favor of affirmative action, which I'm not, but if I say I'm in favor of affirmative action, every conservative in this country will decide that I am in favor of reverse discrimination, set-asides, and quotas. If I say I'm against affirmative action, liberals will think, oh, this guy's a racist, and he doesn't think we should take any affirmative action whatsoever to make up for the injustices of the past. Okay? Affirmative action means different things to them. The word racism means different things to different people. There are black people who think it's impossible for black people to be a racist. And the word has a totally different definition. And when we literally don't know this about each other, we just talk past each other because we're using words that don't mean the same things to the same people, to different people. And and it crosses into everything. The instant someone says I'm a Trump supporter, many people in the country think, oh, that means that you hate black people and you're a racist and no. Okay. The instant you say I'm not a Trump supporter, I don't like Donald Trump, people immediately think, oh, you're a liberal. No, but people decide that things have these meanings that they don't have. And it's all part of the breakdown of education. It's all part of us not talking to one another, not listening to each other, not engaging in rhetoric and debate in a respectful manner, which all has to be done to save this country.
There's never an end. You know, we will probably revisit much of what was talked about, as well as some of the things that had to get left out for editorial reasons. But just to kind of wrap it up, let's hit some of the high points. I remember a few, and you add a few.
Sure.
If we're going to change things, we need to have parental involvement in their own child's education, whether that's homeschooling, whether that's just going over their homework, but know what your kids are being taught.
And two of the main points about that are because A, you are responsible for your children's education, and B, we have to think long term. Yeah, it takes a long time, but the liberals have been thinking long term. We got to think long term.
Yeah, this all didn't happen last week. This took a long time.
No.
We need good people in our school boards, and that's an office that is not. It's not like trying to become the president or a state representative. It's a local thing. We need good people. I'm not going to say good conservatives, good men, good women, good whites, good black. No, we need good people. The education of our children shouldn't be a theater of war for political experimentation. You know,
right?
It should be. We need some reasonable, good-thinking people who love our children. Some other high points.
Yeah, that Everything's available online now. You talk about waging technological war. We can also so easily wage technological education. Go to the National Constitution Center online. Go to the National Homeschooling Association online. Go to Hillsdale College online. It's all there for you. Even if you didn't get the best education, not only can you fix that now from the comfort of your home, but you can literally sit down and take part in the education of your children and your grandchildren.
I implore you, before you hit the hay, to send me the links. You mentioned that 5,000 year leap. Send me some relevant links so that when this video is publicly available on YouTube, we'll be able to add those to the description. Next week's another big one, but I think it'll be much easier to tackle. Spirituality, and I think that will wrap up our institutional examination of the state of our union, so to speak. I'm looking forward to that, and we've had some interesting conversations over the years. Roger and I trust that that's going to be an interesting and informative time, and we'll have some fun too, because we get to jab each other.
We'll have some fun too. We
bet.
Sure will. God bless you, Mark. Yeah, well, I still got to figure out ways to convert you over to my side on, some of the more religious and spiritual matters.
That'll happen right after. That'll happen right after I convert you to my side. So it works well. Roger, thanks for joining us tonight, and we look forward to having you back next week.
We both love Jesus, and we both worship the Blessed Trinity, Mark.
You bet. All right. Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Have a good one, bud.
All righty. God bless you. Bye-bye.
All right, man, I could go on all night, and he could too. He has the gift of continuance. Now, if you're still with us after all this time, thank you for your perseverance. I hope it's been worthwhile for you. I certainly have benefited from it. Tomorrow night, Saturday night, Wild Bill will be with us. Tomorrow night, starting at 9 p.m., not 9:30 Eastern Time, 9 p.m. And I hadn't heard from him today, but I heard from him yesterday, and he's looking forward to that. And we've also got our regular Monday appearance, Casper's Take, on Monday nights, and we've got Dale Didway on Tuesday night. We've got quite a card here at PJNet Live, and we hope that you will join us. And until then, we will sign it off, and we will see you next time right here on PJNet Live. That was good. Always forget to take